Good morning and welcome back finally to FCTV's Studio A at 310 Dillingham Avenue. My name is Jeff Wyman. I am the Government Access Coordinator for Falmouth Community Television. And here today we have a very special show. Senate Spotlight is a series we've been doing for the last few years, and I'd like to introduce finally back to the studio Senator Sue Moran.
Hi, Jeff.
She represents many towns on Cape, and Falmouth is one of them. And what are the other towns you represent, Sue?
So I'm very proud to come from Falmouth and to be the Cape Side Senator. I've got Falmouth, Bourne, Sandwich, and will be, through redistricting, taking on Mashpee in the Plymouth-Barnstable district. And then I also have 4 towns on the other side of the bridge, 3 now with redistricting 4. So it's Plymouth, Plimpton is the new one, Kingston and Pembroke that I have right now.
Wow, so it sounds like it's growing. Your district is growing.
It really is. But, you know, all similar issues that I'm familiar with.
Excellent. Yeah, being from Falmouth too, so we're happy to have you here.
Me too.
So let's get right into it. Let's talk subcommittees a little bit. I know you're on a lot of subcommittees, probably more than a lot of senators are. Just for folks at home, if you wouldn't mind listing some of those in case there's issues that some of those subcommittees are tackling that people might be interested in.
Absolutely, and it's really important work because when bills get filed, this is where we have hearings. So right now I chair the committee. It's a joint committee between the House and Senate. I'm a co-chair of Consumer Protection and Public Licensure, which essentially licenses everything except medical. So for example, we've been reviewing restaurant licenses and having outside licenses as well as drinks to go, for example, which was important all through COVID. I'm vice chair of the Committee on Public Health, which has also been incredibly important during COVID, and we now, for example, have the Dignity in Dying bill that's moved to financial aspect of health committee. I'm also vice chair of Advanced Information Technology, the Internet, and Cybersecurity, which right now is beefing up the Internet access, for example, preventing hacking and actually working with former Senator DiMacedo in his position in academics right now on that. I'm on the Committee for Transportation, which is a great love of mine, just really getting people where they need to go since I kind of grew up here in Falmouth on the Cape Cod RTA board. Further than that, I've got the Cannabis Policy Committee, Joint Committee. I've got the Financial Services Joint Committee, the Joint Committee on Municipalities and Regional Government, which of course I've got good background on coming from Falmouth, chairing the Board of Selectmen, as well as Barnstable County. And then lastly, I've got Tourism, Arts, and Culture, which is such an economic driver in my district and especially on the Cape.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you're busy. And especially since we were chatting beforehand, you just finished up almost a $50 billion budget for the state. Give us some talking points about that and some of the focus.
Sure. So we've been able to do some great things for the district. Right now, it's gone from the House to the Senate, and there is a committee kind of negotiating what points to keep, and the governor will ultimately review and hopefully approve, and anything that's not approved will come back to the legislature. A couple of things of interest here in Falmouth. I was able to include $350,000 for the Falmouth Housing Authority for development, operation, and maintenance of affordable housing in Falmouth, because we need to address units that would be available if they were in habitable condition in addition to building new units. Very proud of working with former Rep. Turkington and getting $100,000 for the Falmouth Housing Corporation for affordable housing, including looking at new ideas like land that might be available that could be purchased, just the way that smart people in Falmouth long ago put land aside to not develop. so that we would have open space, which is great for our water in addition to our leisure. We've been able to do a lot of work with Cape Light Compact so that their programs can proceed. We've gotten good headway when we appeared with Senator Markey in the second of its kind ever field hearing in Plymouth on the nuclear decommissioning and how important that is to the region. And we've been able to get $75,000 in grants for training family caregivers of persons with Alzheimer's and other dementia-related diseases, because a lot of facilities have either narrowed in terms of their ability to take people because of staffing issues, or there have been diversions in programs in general coming out of COVID and otherwise. So a lot of folks are home with families and they need help right now. So those are a couple of the things we've been able to do.
And that's a great segue to our next talking point of discussion. As you said, it was a Common Start bill that does have to do with childcare subsidizing.
Yeah, it's huge. At its core, it's an economic development bill. As we know through COVID, when folks were home, maybe sharing computers, it ended up that one or both parents had to take time off. It has hit women hardest, who have tried to advance in their careers, and as they have to take time off and try to get back to work, they often slide in their career path. So it really makes an effort to making childcare more affordable for families. What does that mean? It also helps the housing industry, because right now, even part-time daycare so that families can work, it costs as much as a monthly rent or mortgage. And so right now, it's a Hobson's choice for young families. Can I afford my apartment or buy a home, or can I have childcare and be able to advance in my career? So it helps at that level. And then at the business level of people who are supplying childcare, so childcare businesses and even home childcare, it helps subsidize them to the extent of the real cost of the business. So for example, when you have families that for whatever reason take their child out of the circulation in the business, they lose that revenue, but they still have to stay open and pay all the costs. So this really hits that gap. And then one of the things I'm most thrilled about is it works at the workforce. So if you work in childcare and you want to advance your degree, it helps the childcare businesses support that effort. And most importantly, it would, if totally approved, it would advance the level of pay for people who work in that business more toward the level of public school teachers. So you have a more well-paid and professional workforce, because they're able to get more certifications. And what does that do ultimately? It's an investment in the future of our children. So similar to the Head Start program, where kids are seen really early, this is from age 0, and it supports kids really getting into educational social settings more consistently and earlier.
What's the timeline for rolling out this bill?
Well, one of the things my co-sponsor, who's on the committee with me on the bill, is Senator Jason Lewis, chaired, and I was on what's called the Early Education Economic Review Commission. And we also had the advantage of another Cape rep, Dave Vieira, was on the committee as well. It's a joint committee between the House and the Senate. And many of the recommendations that have come out of that study, which was at least a year, including professional folks that came in to put a report together, a lot of those, I believe, are going to be adopted probably in the upcoming economic bill. So we'll look toward that, but the advocates have been incredible. Locally, Sandy Feynman Silva has been a real warrior in this effort, so very optimistic that many of the recommendation will come to fruition.
Wow, great. That sounds like it will help out a lot of people.
Hope so, and housing, yes.
In different aspects. Sounds like you guys identified the problem really well with that. Hopefully it gets approved and can ease up some folks' lives a little bit here.
It's huge. You got it.
So sticking with the theme of the home, of course, people have to have work done, renovations, repairs, and they have to hire contractors to come into their home and do this work. And there's been some concern, I suppose, with home safety. So the legislature has been discussing what we're going to call a Contractors Act bill, which has to do with the safety of people in their homes that are inviting contractors in. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I've had an integral role in hopefully moving this forward as chair of consumer protection and public licensure, because one of the things that we want to try to tighten up in terms of safety in home contractors is licensing requirements. So just as, as an example, you can have a contractor get in trouble, maybe take money and not finish work in, say, Florida. And up till now, there's been kind of a really low information system if they come to Massachusetts. So they may be, not having good business practices. They may not be someone that you would really want to feel safe in your home with. And yet we have such a high need for workforce right now. A lot of people are trying to get, whether it's plumbers or electricians or roofing contractors, into their homes just to get the work done so that their homes can be safe and livable and maybe getting ready for a tourism season or rents. And so it's a fast-moving bunch of businesses. And there have been reports of such safety concerns. So as chair of public licensure, what I'm doing is working with the state division that licenses and trying to really get some check and fail-safe systems that we can put in, whether it is information background systems or really signing under the pains and penalties of perjury so that they could be prosecuted when they apply for such licenses. And then also really a consumer education system where we can let the general public know that there are risks of scammers out there. So because of reports in the past, and I was actually on a sort of a gotcha TV show where it was the media that really started collecting this information and saying this is a problem. And the governor, to his credit, filed some potential legislation to really kind of fix that gap. So that we're very hopeful is moving forward and the people will be more protected.
So this is during the licensing process. So they're going to be signing papers saying whatever the details are, that this is completely accurate. And if they're lying, under the threat of legal action. So it's another tier of protection. Now, from the consumer's perspective, you're talking about some sort of like consumer window. So we're talking maybe like a professional or state-run sort of Yelp kind of site where folks can go and see like backgrounds and actually some of the documentation of these contractors? Is that how they'll interact with it?
That's what we're working toward. So certainly there isn't such a thing that exists right now. And the state really hasn't been in the business of looking that deeply to have such an information center. So what, in terms of a first step, it's really about suggesting to consumers, check references, number one. Check if a contractor is from, just coming to your door and saying, do you want your driveway done, and it's something you haven't solicited, be extra careful. If it's someone, that is trying to have you sign a contract but pay for the full amount of the job rather than just an initial deposit, a lot of times people aren't aware that they have choices. You can say, no, here's a third, for example, to get started and buy supplies. So we're looking at an initial phase, consumer information, and then building toward tighter and tighter licensure as it goes forward.
Yeah, that does sound pretty important. Great, so let's move on. We've got the NBA Finals that I believe start today. I'm not a basketball fan myself, but I'm sure there's a lot of people watching who will be watching the finals. And people like to bet on sports a lot. And there's a bill in the legislature now having to do with sports betting. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So it's a little different depending on if you're looking at the House version versus the Senate version. I'll tell you about the Senate version. One of the reasons this has really come to the attention of leadership and has moved through both houses, albeit in different ways, is that there's an estimate that $35 million in tax revenue can be generated that we could then take and invest in priorities such as workforce, housing, childcare, that kind of thing. And so it's something that the legislature wanted to do something about. It's a matter of how do you do it without really having the the potential of criminal abuse of such a system, which has been reported in the past in some areas. And also there was a drive because a lot of states around us have already legalized it, and so people in businesses in Massachusetts were sort of saying we're really losing out on that revenue. One of the biggest differences that the Senate has proposed, it's really a balance between the economic interests and the community interests. And it doesn't allow it does allow for inpatient online sports betting, but not just all on the internet, so there's more accountability, and also consumer safeguards with respect to gaming addiction and recovery. And then the other issue is the college sports. So the Senate is really trying to take a bite out of it in the right way. And then right now the bill will go to joint committee and be negotiated as to which aspects will eventually be presented to the governor.
So what's the delineation between professional sports betting and college sports betting? So
the thought is that younger folks might be vulnerable in terms of the whole college scene.
The athletes themselves.
Exactly. And that there's also some thinking that that's just not the way we, in Massachusetts, might want our college sports to be viewed. So, it's that piece of it. There's a difference of opinion, and that we hope will be worked out through committee because that's the legislative process, and it is moving forward.
Great. So with us living on Cape Cod, along the coast, and with all the sea level rise that's happening and climate change that's happening, there's a bill in the legislature right now that's going to help. That's maybe not solve the problem, but take steps in the right direction. What is this bill?
Well, and you're right, it's particularly important, I think, on the Cape. So it's an act driving climate policy forward. It's something that the Senate expects to be sort of tweaked as things move along. It really, it's a supplement to a bill that was codified in 2021, and it has a goal of reaching net zero carbon emissions by 2050. It targets 3 areas in general, which is clean energy, transportation, and sustainable infrastructure, which of course is housing. And I know I just spoke with representatives of building not too long ago, and they are really moving forward on creative ways to move ahead. A couple of the sticking points that have been brought up, the departments of energy in the State House are really grappling with, we know on the Cape we have blackouts pretty frequently, especially when storms come up. And we don't right now, for example, have the battery technology that we could, if we have a blackout, just switch on the battery and never have power surges. We also have, we're asking folks to switch over from carbon fuels, like say they're oil burners, to splits maybe that are electric powered. If we go ahead and do that, and then we do have blackouts, we're going to be really cold, and the shelters that we have set up on an emergency basis are really, I think, going to be kind of full. So we're at a crossroads where we're trying to look at how can we bolster moving consumers to more electric, which is so much better for our climate. And also we look at for electric cars. They're terrific. They're getting more and more dependable mechanically. You're starting to see more of them, but we also need to be sure that the plug-in infrastructure is, for example, if I'm going to drive to Western Mass, how am I going to plot, okay, my capacity for my vehicle, depending on whether or not I'm running the air conditioner or any other system, is going to get me, maybe not to Sturbridge, maybe to Worcester. So where in Worcester am I going to find a plug? And how accessible is that going to be? And certainly they are available, but as more and more people get into electric cars, we have to make sure that infrastructure is set up. So it's sort of, it's moving forward, which we know we've got to do right now for climate change, but as the pieces get put on sort of the highway of moving forward, it'll become easier for consumers to sort of sign on. So it's a matter of, hearts and minds and infrastructure and trying to put those together, not only for our homes, but also in transportation.
Almost like if you build it, they will come kind of scenario.
You exactly have it right. And it's how do we build it? Because, the utility companies, energy companies, they're trying to figure out, we know we have issues with the gas in the ground, and we know how dangerous that can be. So do we put money into making that safer right now when we know those systems we're hoping are going to be obsolete very quickly? And what do we do with the homes that depend on those systems right now? So there's the devil is in the details. But the legislature has set it up so that we can do a little push me, pull you with that as we move forward. And in fact, I have to credit, we mentioned earlier my Cape Light Compact bill. I met with Cape Light Compact. They sort of outlined what challenges they were having because the way they do business does not fit into the Department of Public Utility structure right now. My first effort was to put a bill together, worked with my colleague, Senator Sear, and it wasn't the right vehicle for that piece of legislation. So we went back and I tried to figure out, okay, what would be the next step to move this as quickly as possible before the next legislative cycle. And I met with DPU. The chair of Senate Ways and Means kind of worked with me as well. So I've been partnering with not only the governor's office, where the DPU is the sort of administrative office, but also with Mike Rodericks, who chairs Senate Ways and Means, about, well, how can we put this together? And helping, because part of it is in litigation between Cape Light Compact and the DPU, because the legislative body, the administrative body, is essentially saying, well, we don't see a path for that. So we're making them a path so the consumers on Cape can save money and have cleaner energy moving forward. So that's one of the things where, again, we're building it. How did you say it? As it
Field of Dreams.
Field of Dreams, exactly.
They will come.
As it comes to, that's exactly right.
Kind of along the same lines, you were mentioning with climate change and trying to take steps to solving that issue. The governor was spearheading an MBTA zoning initiative. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So, all around Massachusetts, and I think particularly in the Plymouth-Barnstable district, there is real quandaries and but yet an agreement on need about building housing and having more housing available. So one of the things that the governor proposed is a multifamily MBTA adjacent zone. And I've met a couple of times with Secretary Keneally on that subject because the administration, as the governor has proposed this, has done some outreach to communities to say, what about if we take our current programs and take some resources away from those and really put it towards spearheading transportation-centered development of housing. That, the governor's office said, we think will have a benefit for the climate, and it will help people who either can't afford single-use cars or who just prefer more climate-friendly options like walking, biking, so that if we build housing right there so everything is more accessible, wouldn't that make sense to everyone? And a lot of my communities commented, and that's why the process is important, to say, well, actually what we need is senior housing, for example. We don't really need the workforce housing where we view this is focused more on. And so those communities complained really appropriately, because this is a solving complaints situation here, that they did not want the resources taken away from the programs that they were using to develop housing to put toward this major effort. And Secretary Keneally listened, very well, and we're really still in the process of tweaking that whole new system. And I have to applaud the governor for trying to think out of the box and really get housing moving. But we really need a two-prong approach. One, certainly look at help from the state, but secondly, every community in my district, whether it's on the Plymouth side or on the Cape side, has a strong municipal interest in building housing, because a lot of folks, whether it's first responders or folks that work at hospitals or banks or in retail or restaurants, all need housing. And we've got to look at the kind of housing that's appropriate for us in the seasonal wave community, because we have lots more people, not only tourists and folks who have summer homes here, but also all of the folks that have jobs to sustain that community. And so we need really the citizens and the community itself to tell its municipal leaders, its select boards, its town managers, its zoning and zoning boards and housing folks what kind of housing they want, and we have to be able to support that and put money towards it. Just as an example, on Nantucket, they have a proposal to tax the most expensive homes and put some of that money into housing. In Falmouth, for example, we've got the CP fund.
Community preservation?
I'm trying to look for the new name. Community preservation fund to, a piece of that for housing. In the budget, we talked about, I was able to get a huge amount of resources, 350 on one side to really take care of what we have existing, sort of the low-lying fruit, so that we can get people into homes, and also 100,000 to really look toward the future. So that's something that's, I'd say, one of the biggest challenges that we have going forward.
Yeah, I know the select board here in Falmouth is very focused on affordable housing, because it's a real problem here. It sounds like a lot of these things we've been talking about are very much intertwined with each other. Like, one affects the other. Climate change here, public safety here, transportation, and going along the same lines as climate change, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about nuclear power, because that's a controversial issue, and the Pilgrim plant is still functioning, but there is a decommissioning process that's happening with a company called Holtec. Right. So where are we at in that process?
So I've been spearheading the effort to make sure that the public knows exactly what Holtec is proposing. I think probably for the first time I was able to pull together legislatures from the Cape side as well as the Plymouth side. So both Cape legislators and Plymouth legislators have met with me, and we had the Attorney General's office represented, we had the state represented, we had what's called NDCAP, which is the Citizens Advisory Committee for the Plymouth decommissioning. All together, I've testified at NDCAP. Senator Markey, as well as Congressman Keating, have really been in the forefront here with Senator Moran on looking out for people's interests in Massachusetts on nuclear decommissioning in general and for Holtec in particular. Senator Markey having held the second of its kind field hearing that I mentioned, and having the Nuclear Regulatory Board testify about what their new rules are going to be. Which did two things. One is the new rules are not subject to the decommissioning of Holtec right now, or Holtec isn't subject to the new rules. But it was an opportunity to have the administrator of Holtec testify and be questioned. And not only about the proposed rules, but about what is actually going on with Holtec, since they've put a freeze on the decommissioning for a year because they had proposed putting huge amounts of nuclear waste into Cape Cod Bay. And when the federal and the state delegation from my office leading heard about that, we wanted to stay on top of Holtec's proposals moving forward, so we just didn't have a year of abeyance and then business as usual. And so what came out of that hearing is that there a bunch of things. There's going to be, probably with HUI, some analysis of actually what's being proposed to be dumped. There are going to be requirements for more public education and communication to be put out, and Holtec's administrator actually agreed on the record, and without that hearing there never would have been this opportunity to have community input step by step moving forward, and to not just have it go the cheapest, fastest way, which is dump it into the bay. Because we know that in other decommissionings, there have been trucking to sites. In fact, even through Holtec, they have trucked radioactive materials out of state to depositories. And then lastly, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was really under fire because in Senator Markey's view, and I think in a lot of people's view, it really has been a rubber stamp for the, you take the Plymouth plant, which is owned by one company, and then it gets quietly moved to another company, and you wonder what sort of liability protection there could be, and it's only as good as that new company itself, and we're really a testing ground for a system that new company, Holtec, is planning to use all over the United States. And so we want to do it right from the beginning. This is certainly something that we've got to tackle, decommissioning, and we want to be sure that the host communities, such as Plymouth and the greater Plymouth-Barnstable community, that the material, if there was an accident, there have been studies that show it moving all the way to Iceland, so this is a big issue for lots of folks. We want to be sure that it's not just about the company saving money, and I've actually filed a couple of pieces of legislation. One is to actually penalize any dumping, and the other one is to allow, and this was just moved forward with the governor in the current budget, to really look at providing funds so that we're not depending on information just from Holtec, that there are independent reviews. So we're staying on that.
Very important. You just don't get the information from that one company. So that's a very concerning issue, and a lot of people have their eyes on it. And so, Sue, we've talked a lot. We've gone through all the talking points today that we wanted to. So if someone does have a concern or issue or just wants to contact you, how does one go about that?
It's funny. I don't know my own phone number because I don't call it, so I wrote it down.
Good.
To call my office, it's 617-722-1330. And of course, you can always email me at susan.moran@masenate.gov.
Excellent. Well, Senator Moran, appreciate you spending some time with us and educating the public about all your work up in Boston. So we'll have to have you back probably late summer to give us another update.
There'll be more news, and thanks for staying with us and really providing important information to people through COVID who may have been home, and you really are the top source for local news, so thanks for that.
Absolutely, it's our job and we like to be busy. Excellent. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. This has been the Senate Spotlight. I'm Jeff Wyman. We'll see you next time.